Did you know that the life of Pontius Pilate, the man who authorized the crucifixion of Jesus, ended in a mysterious and tragic way? Imagine being responsible for one of history's most controversial decisions and living with the consequences in silence. Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, is a figure mentioned in various historical and religious sources, yet what became of him after that fateful day remains shrouded in mystery. This story weaves together biblical accounts, historical documents, and narratives about Pilate, who is mentioned in the 4 Gospels of the New Testament. His hesitation and eventual decision to crucify Jesus are detailed in Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23, and John 18-19, highlighting his interaction with Jesus and the pressure he faced from Jewish authorities. In addition, sources like the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the Roman philosopher Philo of Alexandria provide further context on Pilate's rule in Judea. Together, these sources offer a broader understanding of Pilate's complex role in the crucifixion. To fully grasp his story, it's essential to explore not only the events narrated in sacred texts, but also the intricate political and social dynamics of his time. Keep watching to uncover the incredible and unsettling story of the Roman governor who sealed Jesus' fate. Pontius Pilate found himself in a difficult situation. The Jewish religious leaders were demanding Jesus' crucifixion, accusing him of blasphemy, but Pilate could find no crime in him. John 18:38. He tried several times to release Jesus, even offering the crowd the choice to free a prisoner as per the Passover custom. But the people chose Barabbas over Jesus. Matthew 27:15-26. Despite his reluctance, Pilate eventually gave in to the crowd's demands, symbolically washing his hands to signify his attempt to absolve himself of responsibility for Jesus' death. Matthew 27:24. This act has echoed through history as a symbol of cowardice and injustice. The biblical narrative also highlights Pilate's attempts to appease the crowd by having Jesus scourged, hoping this lesser punishment would satisfy the Jewish leaders. Luke 23:16. This moment not only sealed Jesus' fate, but also marked the beginning of Pilate's own downfall, as his actions and their consequences have been debated for centuries. Pilate was acutely aware of the political instability in Jerusalem during the Passover celebration, and the presence of Jesus, seen by many as a prophet, only heightened tensions. The religious leaders accused Jesus of inciting revolt against Rome, Luke 23:2, a serious charge that could justify his execution under Roman law. Pilate faced a tough choice. If he released Jesus, he risked a Jewish uprising, but if he condemned him, he would be authorizing the death of an innocent man. In the end, to avoid a riot, Pilate yielded to the demands of the crowd, unaware that this decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. Although the Bible does not delve into Pilate's internal thoughts, his actions suggest a man under extreme pressure, struggling to balance justice with maintaining public order. History suggests that this choice weighed heavily on him. The task of maintaining order in a province like Judea required a delicate balance, and any sign of weakness could be exploited by Rome's enemies. Pilate's situation was precarious, with any decision potentially leading to severe political and social repercussions. While Pilate was judging Jesus, his wife Claudia Procula had a disturbing dream. She sent a message to Pilate, urging him to have nothing to do with that righteous man. Matthew 27:19. This dream, mentioned only in the Gospel of Matthew, remains enigmatic in its origin and significance. Some interpret it as divine intervention, attempting to prevent Jesus' crucifixion. Claudia Procula, though briefly mentioned in the Bible, plays a significant role in highlighting Pilate's moral dilemma. She believed the dream to be a divine warning, and ignoring it would be a mistake that would haunt Pilate forever. In later Christian tradition, Procula was sanctified, her perceived importance in the Passion drama emphasized. Some view Claudia's dream as a symbol of the voice of conscience in moments of moral crisis, adding a supernatural dimension to the narrative and suggesting that greater forces were at play during the trial. Under Pilate's orders, Jesus was crucified with an inscription above his head that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," John 19:19. This message, written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, was Pilate's way of reinforcing the accusation that Jesus claimed kingship, which was seen as treason against Caesar. Even as Jesus suffered, Pilate grappled with his own doubts and guilt. The crucifixion of Jesus is a pivotal event in the Gospels, described in vivid detail, including the reactions of onlookers and the extraordinary events that occurred, such as the darkness at noon and the tearing of the temple veil, Matthew 27:45-51. These supernatural signs only deepened Pilate's inner turmoil, hinting at Jesus' divine innocence. The Bible portrays the crucifixion not only as a human event, but also as a cosmic struggle between good and evil. Historically, crucifixion was a brutal punishment reserved for the worst criminals, intended to be a public spectacle of shame and suffering. Pilate's decision to proceed with this execution, despite his reservations, underscores the intense pressure and complex political and social dynamics he faced. After the crucifixion, Pilate was haunted by his decision. Manipulated by the crowd and religious leaders, he was tormented by guilt. Jesus' words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," Luke 23:34, echoed in his mind, and the weight of his actions became unbearable. Although the Bible does not delve into Pilate's subsequent feelings, it's reasonable to speculate that he struggled with the moral consequences of his decision. Christian tradition suggests that Pilate never escaped the burden of responsibility for Jesus' death, a weight that deeply impacted his later life. Some apocryphal writings and traditions, such as those from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, elaborate on Pilate's anguish, depicting him as a man consumed by guilt. Although speculative, there are even accounts suggesting that Pilate eventually converted to Christianity in search of redemption. The guards at Jesus' tomb reported his resurrection, Matthew 28:40-15, causing a stir among Jewish leaders. Pilate, trying to suppress the truth, bribed the guards to spread falsehoods, Matthew 28:12-15. Yet, news of the resurrection spread rapidly, intensifying Pilate's inner torment. The resurrection, central to Christian faith, was affirmed by the Gospels and New Testament epistles, 1 Corinthians 15:3-8. For Pilate, it was a crisis of legitimacy. If Jesus truly rose, it validated his divinity and revealed that Pilate had condemned an innocent man. Pilate's attempts to cover up the resurrection reflect his struggle to maintain control and sanity in the face of events that defied Roman authority and logic. The rapid spread of Christianity in the following decades, with many Jews and Gentiles converting, magnified the impact of the resurrection and the significance of Pilate's role. The efforts to suppress the truth highlight the ongoing clash between Rome's temporal power and Christianity's emerging spiritual influence. Emperor Tiberius received conflicting reports from Judea, placing Pilate in a vulnerable position, especially given his unpopularity due to brutal actions and disrespect for Jewish customs. Historians like Flavius Josephus and Philo of Alexandria portrayed Pilate as a harsh governor, whose actions often incited Jewish anger. His controversial use of temple funds to build an aqueduct was one such incident. The situation worsened when Pilate was recalled to Rome after a massacre of Samaritans on Mount Gerizim, leading to his removal from office by Lucius Vitellius, the governor of Syria. Back in Rome, Pilate faced a thorough investigation, effectively ending his political career. His downfall and the political instability in Judea during his rule illustrate the challenges of Roman governance, where enforcing Roman authority often clashed with local traditions and desires for autonomy. In Rome, Pontius Pilate faced intense scrutiny. Emperor Tiberius was incensed by the unrest Pilate had stirred in Judea, and Pilate's political adversaries seized the chance to undermine him. He was stripped of his power and exiled. His wife Claudia continued to be plagued by nightmares, while Pilate, consumed by guilt, withdrew into seclusion. While there was no formal trial, tradition suggests he was compelled to retire from public life. Apocryphal texts like the Acts of Pilate offer alternative stories of his life post-crucifixion, often portraying him as a figure of remorse and penance. The circumstances surrounding Pilate's death are veiled in mystery, with various traditions offering different accounts of his end. Nonetheless, these stories depict a man whose actions had far-reaching consequences on his life and history. The investigation in Rome likely centered on his failure to maintain peace and his poor governance, highlighting the intricate power dynamics of the Roman Empire. Once a powerful figure, Pilate spent his final days in shame and isolation, a tragic irony for a man who had tried to secure his position through injustice. The details of Pilate's death are obscure. Some historical sources suggest he committed suicide, overwhelmed by guilt and the disgrace of exile. Eusebius of Caesarea, a 4th-century church historian, notes that Pilate took his own life under Emperor Caligula's reign. Other accounts, like those of Tacitus, omit specific details of his death. Christian tradition presents various versions of his demise, with some suggesting Pilate converted to Christianity before he died. Legends from medieval and Renaissance literature, such as the Golden Legend, recount that Pilate ended his life in exile in Gaul, his body thrown into a river. His death is portrayed as a tragic conclusion for a man central to the crucifixion of Jesus. The blending of history, tradition, and speculation around his death underscores the complexity of Pilate's figure in collective memory. Over centuries, Pilate's story has been used to explore themes of guilt, redemption, and justice. If Pilate's suicide is factual, it represents his final act of despair and remorse, while traditions of his conversion suggest a late attempt at seeking forgiveness. These varied narratives illustrate the difficulty of distinguishing fact from fiction when discussing historical figures entangled in events of profound religious and moral significance. Pilate's figure has become a symbol of infamy in Christian history, often depicted as a weak and easily swayed man who lacked the courage to uphold what he knew to be right. His life and death are reminders of the enduring impact of our decisions and the consequences of yielding to pressure. In the Gospels, Pilate is portrayed as a governor who, despite recognizing Jesus' innocence, gave in to the crowd's demands. Over time, Christian tradition has vilified him, though some apocryphal texts offer a more compassionate view of his character. Pilate's hesitation and eventual decision have been the subject of numerous theological and historical discussions, reflecting the moral and ethical complexities of his role in the crucifixion. The dark legacy of Pilate serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing external pressures to override justice and truth. He is often compared to other historical figures who faced similar moral dilemmas, and his story is used to highlight the importance of courage and integrity. In many Christian traditions, Pilate is remembered during Holy Week as a symbol of how cowardice and injustice can lead to devastating consequences. Pilate's tragic story also provides rich theological insights. Standing before the Son of God, he failed to recognize the truth, exemplifying human fallibility. Pilate's story challenges us to consider our own decisions and the courage required to follow the truth. Over centuries, theologians have debated Pilate's role in the Passion of Christ, often using him to illustrate the tension between justice and expedience. His attempt to wash his hands of responsibility is seen as symbolic of a guilty conscience trying to avoid accountability. Pilate's figure is also invoked in sermons to emphasize the need for moral courage and integrity. His story serves as a reminder that, in the face of difficult choices, we must have the strength to act justly, even at personal cost. Christian theology views Pilate's role as emblematic of the struggle between good and evil, with his failure to recognize and act on the truth of Jesus serving as a warning against moral complacency. Additionally, Pilate's story invites introspection, urging us to examine our own hearts and strive to live by principles of justice and truth. Pontius Pilate remains a significant and multifaceted figure in art, literature, and Christian tradition. Throughout history, his internal conflict and role in Jesus' crucifixion have captivated artists and writers who have portrayed him in diverse ways. Medieval sacred art and modern literature alike reflect evolving perceptions of Pilate. In José Saramago's The Gospel According to Jesus Christ and Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, Pilate is depicted as a complex character grappling with duty and morality. Artistic portrayals often show him in the act of condemning Jesus, with his expression fluctuating between doubt and resignation. These representations underscore Pilate's enduring impact on our collective imagination and highlight his historical and theological significance. Pilate's legacy is preserved in Christian traditions and serves as a symbol of human frailty and the complexities of power. His story is remembered not only for his actions, but for his failure to stand up for justice. Pilate's role in the Creed and the Passion narratives keeps him central in Christian thought, where he is used to explore themes of morality and responsibility. His life illustrates how fear and cowardice can lead to morally questionable decisions and offers a lens through which to examine judgment and fallibility. Pilate's actions and his part in Jesus' condemnation provide a case study in ethics and leadership, emphasizing the importance of acting with integrity and courage. Pilate's story continues to resonate within Christian faith, challenging us to reflect on our roles in society and the weight of our decisions. His tragic figure serves as a poignant reminder of the consequences of our actions and the need for justice and truth. Pilate's legacy encourages us to prioritize redemption and forgiveness, reminding us of the power of seeking truth despite the difficulties. His life remains a mirror for our own ethical dilemmas, urging us to act with integrity and courage in all situations. Reflecting on the life and death of Pontius Pilate challenges us to examine our own actions and the moral responsibilities we carry, especially when faced with pressure. Pilate, the Roman governor who authorized Jesus' crucifixion, faced a tragic and enigmatic end. Imagine bearing the weight of one of history's most contentious decisions and grappling with its repercussions in silence. Pilate is a complex figure mentioned across historical and religious texts. His story, detailed in the New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, highlights his reluctance to condemn Jesus, despite intense pressure from Jewish leaders. Pilate's attempts to release Jesus, including the Passover tradition of freeing a prisoner, ultimately failed when the crowd chose Barabbas over Jesus. Despite his personal misgivings and his symbolic act of washing his hands to distance himself from the decision, Pilate succumbed to the crowd's demands and handed Jesus over for crucifixion. This act, seen as both cowardly and unjust, has resonated throughout history. The Gospels also recount Pilate's efforts to placate the crowd, even resorting to scourging Jesus in hopes of averting further violence. This moment not only sealed Jesus' fate, but marked the beginning of Pilate's own troubled legacy. Pilate's situation was further complicated by the volatile political climate of Jerusalem during Passover, with accusations from the Jewish leaders that Jesus was inciting rebellion. Pilate was caught in a precarious position. Releasing Jesus could lead to a rebellion, while condemning him meant executing an innocent man. His decision to yield to the demands of the crowd in order to maintain order would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Bible offers little insight into Pilate's personal struggles, but his actions reveal a man caught between justice and maintaining public order. Historical accounts suggest that this dilemma weighed heavily on him, as any sign of weakness in such a politically unstable region could be disastrous. Interestingly, Pilate's wife, Claudia Procula, experienced a disturbing dream and warned him to avoid condemning Jesus. This warning, unique to the Gospel of Matthew, adds an additional layer of intrigue to Pilate's already complex story, hinting at a possible divine intervention that could have changed the course of history. Claudia Procula may appear briefly in the Bible, but her story significantly impacts Pilate's moral struggle. She experienced intense suffering due to a dream she believed was a divine warning about Jesus. Ignoring this warning was a mistake that would haunt Pilate for the rest of his life. Over time, Christian traditions have elevated Procula's role, seeing her as a symbol of conscience trying to intervene during moral crises. Her unsettling dream introduces a supernatural element, hinting at greater forces influencing the trial. Jesus' crucifixion, ordered by Pilate, is marked by the inscription, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," John 19:19, written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. This was Pilate's attempt to underscore the charge of treason against Jesus. Despite his own doubts and guilt, Pilate proceeded with the crucifixion, a central event in the Gospels. The narrative details the reactions of witnesses and supernatural signs, such as darkness at noon and the tearing of the temple veil, Matthew 27:45-51, which only deepened Pilate's sense of guilt and suggested Jesus' divine innocence. The crucifixion was not just a human event, but a cosmic battle between good and evil. Crucifixion was reserved for the worst offenders and meant to be a public display of agony and disgrace. Pilate's decision to use this method, despite his reservations, illustrates the intense pressure and complexity of his political and social situation. Afterward, Pilate was consumed by guilt, haunted by the crowd's manipulation and the haunting words of Jesus, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. The Bible doesn't detail Pilate's subsequent feelings, but it's reasonable to speculate that the psychological toll was immense. Christian tradition portrays Pilate as being deeply tormented by his role in Jesus' death, with some apocryphal sources, an Ethiopian Orthodox tradition even suggesting he sought redemption through Christianity, though this is speculative. Following Jesus' resurrection, reported by the guards, Matthew 28:4-15, Pilate faced a crisis of legitimacy. His attempt to cover up the resurrection by bribing the guards to spread falsehoods, Matthew 28:12-15, only amplified his torment. The resurrection, affirmed by the Gospels and Epistles, 1 Corinthians 15:3-8, not only confirmed Jesus' divine claims but also highlighted Pilate's error in condemning an innocent man. Pilate's efforts to suppress this truth reflect his struggle to maintain order and sanity against the growing influence of Christianity, which continued to challenge Roman authority and spread rapidly in the ensuing years. Emperor Tiberius was bombarded with mixed reports about the situation in Judea. Pontius Pilate, already in a delicate position due to accusations of mismanagement and his unpopularity for his harsh rule and disregard for Jewish customs, faced mounting criticism. Descriptions by Flavius Josephus and Philo of Alexandria paint Pilate as a callous governor, whose actions often inflamed Jewish resentment. One of his most controversial moves was using temple funds to build an aqueduct, which sparked significant outrage among the Jews. The situation deteriorated further, leading to Pilate's recall to Rome to answer for his actions. His tenure ended after a massacre of Samaritans on Mount Gerizim, which, along with his overall poor administration, led to his removal by Lucius Vitellius, the governor of Syria. In Rome, Pilate faced a rigorous investigation, and his political career was effectively over. His actions in Judea had serious consequences for both himself and the province, underscoring the challenges of Roman provincial governance, where maintaining order often clashed with local traditions and desires for independence. In Rome, Pilate was subjected to a thorough investigation. Tiberius was outraged by the unrest Pilate had stirred in Judea, and Pilate's political rivals seized the moment to bring him down. He was deposed and exiled, while his wife Claudia continued to suffer from nightmares, and Pilate himself, overwhelmed by guilt, lived in seclusion. Traditions suggest Pilate did not face a formal trial, but was forced to retire from public life. Some apocryphal texts, like the Acts of Pilate, offer alternative stories of his post-crucifixion life, often depicting him in a state of remorse and penance. His death remains shrouded in mystery, with various traditions proposing different endings. Some suggest he committed suicide during Caligula's reign, while others, such as Tacitus, offer no details. Christian tradition presents varied accounts, with some suggesting he converted to Christianity before dying. The medieval and Renaissance legend of Pilate's death in exile in Gaul, where he allegedly threw himself into a river, adds another layer to his story. Pilate's death, whether seen as an act of despair or a quest for redemption, reflects the complex interplay of historical fact, legend, and religious significance surrounding his life and actions. Pilate's figure has become a dark legend in Christian history, often depicted as a weak and indecisive man who lacked the courage to stand up for what he knew was right. His life and death underscore the enduring impact of our choices and the repercussions of succumbing to external pressure. In the Gospels, Pilate is shown as a governor who, despite recognizing Jesus' innocence, gave in to the crowd's demands. Over the centuries, Christian tradition has vilified him, though some apocryphal texts offer a more sympathetic view. Pilate's story has sparked extensive theological and historical debate, highlighting the moral and ethical challenges of his role in Jesus' crucifixion. His hesitation and final decision serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of being swayed by pressure at the expense of justice and truth. Pilate is often compared to other historical figures who faced similar moral dilemmas, illustrating the need for courage and integrity. During Holy Week, he is remembered as an example of how cowardice and injustice can lead to disastrous outcomes. Pilate's tragic narrative also invites deep theological reflection. He stood before Jesus, the Son of God, but failed to discern the truth, showcasing human fallibility. His inability to act justly highlights the challenge of making difficult decisions and the courage needed to uphold truth. Theologians have long debated his role in the Passion of Christ, using his story to explore the tension between justice and convenience. His attempt to wash his hands of guilt symbolizes a guilty conscience seeking to evade responsibility. Sermons often use Pilate's story to stress the importance of moral courage and integrity, urging us to act justly even in the face of personal consequences. In art and literature, Pilate's internal struggle and role in the crucifixion have been explored across centuries. From medieval religious art to modern novels such as José Saramago's The Gospel According to Jesus Christ and Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita, Pilate is portrayed as a complex character torn between duty and morality. Artistic depictions often show him in the moment of Jesus' condemnation, reflecting a range of emotions from doubt to resignation. These cultural portrayals highlight Pilate's enduring impact on the collective imagination and his significance in historical and theological contexts. Popular culture continues to reflect evolving values and social perceptions, demonstrating how each generation re-evaluates Pilate's figure in light of contemporary understandings. His story remains central in discussions about power, morality, and the consequences of human actions, underscoring his ongoing relevance. Pilate is remembered not only for what he did, but for his failure to stand up for truth and justice. His inclusion in the Creed and the Passion narratives ensures that his figure remains pivotal in Christian memory, serving as a profound lesson in morality and responsibility. His legacy is a reminder of the challenges faced by those in power and the critical importance of making just decisions. Pontius Pilate's story leaves a profound mark on Christian faith, urging us to examine our own roles in society and the weight of our choices. As a tragic figure, Pilate's life and death are both inspirational and cautionary. In Christian theology, Pilate represents themes of sin, redemption, and justice, and his involvement in Jesus' crucifixion is crucial to understanding Christ's sacrifice and salvation. Pilate's enduring impact underscores the significance of his actions and the lessons we can draw from his narrative. His story is often used in education to illustrate the importance of responsibility and integrity. Pilate exemplifies how power can corrupt and how lacking moral courage can lead to grave consequences. His story prompts us to reflect on our actions and our duty to act justly, even under pressure. The depth of Pilate's impact on Christian faith serves as a constant reminder to seek truth and justice in all circumstances, highlighting the power of redemption and forgiveness. Pontius Pilate, who sanctioned Jesus' crucifixion, embodies a blend of power, guilt, and remorse. Considering his life and death reminds us of the importance of making fair decisions and confronting the truth, regardless of how challenging it may be. Pilate's tragedy serves as an eternal reminder that our actions have repercussions and that pursuing justice and truth should be our foremost priorities. His story mirrors our own moral and ethical struggles, encouraging us to act with integrity and bravery. Reflecting on Pilate's life pushes us to evaluate our responsibilities and the impact of our decisions, both now and in the future. His narrative teaches us about redemption and the necessity of seeking the truth, no matter how tough or unpopular that quest may be. Pilate remains a figure who resonates deeply in our collective conscience, reminding us that justice and truth must always be our guiding principles.